The man's first attempt at using his self-created martial art left everyone present utterly shocked. What seemed like a move so simple that even a 3-year-old child could mimic was refined by me until it contained the true essence of the sword. Yet only 3 days ago, I was still the notorious outcast of the martial world. At that time, the dark sect suddenly launched a bloody assault on the martial alliance, causing heavy casualties across all sections. My close friend Harold and I fought side by side and barely held them off. In the end, I even struck down both the mastermind, Princess of the Night, and the Sword Knight of the Fish. During that battle, Harold was mortally wounded, his life nearing its end. In his final moments, he pressed the spirit pearl of Manhwa into my palm. But before I could recover from the grief of losing my friend, a violent demonic aura suddenly struck from behind. I didn't even see who it was before that force ripped my body in half. At the same time, the spirit pearl on my wrist burst forth with a blinding red light. When I next opened my eyes, I found myself in an unfamiliar place, standing before Elder White of Manhwa. Yet I was confused. Why did he call me William? William was the eldest disciple of Manhwa's second generation, the very student Harold had entrusted me to care for before his death. Unless they were joking with me, this meant I had been reborn in William's body. I quickly rushed outside to wash my face. From the memories I now carried, I had been living as William for 7 days and 7 nights. During this time, I had dreamed through over 20 years of the original host's life. The bloody history of Shangxi led to the annihilation of several sects, and even Manhwa suffered a devastating night raid. The original William was gravely injured during this attack and ultimately died from wounds to his chest. So there was no reason for me to feel guilty about taking over his fate. That strange light I saw clearly came from the spirit pearl Harold had given me in his final moments. Perhaps he foresaw my destined calamity and arranged for me to live on through William. Since these were Harold's last wishes, I must carry them and live on. Reflecting further, I realized the masked man who struck me down was far stronger than even the Princess of the Night. Even at the height of my former power, would not have been his match. This meant I must train William's body to surpass even my past self. Meanwhile, the elders of Manhwa convened to discuss matters. Their sect had suffered catastrophic losses in the Night Palace's attack, buildings destroyed, disciples severely wounded, and Harold's death striking a heavy blow, especially to William. Yet Elder White remarked that William had accepted the matter with unexpected calmness and was healing with astonishing speed. Still, the sect leader worried he only appeared calm on the surface. As for me, I secluded myself in a chamber to study Manhwa's martial arts. In my past life, I had only practiced demonic techniques, so learning orthodox methods now felt strange. It reminded me of a time when Harold once invited me to observe Manhwa's swordsmanship. Though Harold was my longtime friend, I told him honestly that their martial arts were in shambles. To my surprise, Harold agreed. Manhwa was already losing its former glory, falling further behind with each generation. Though their swordsmanship could manifest plum blossom phantoms, the sect had become complacent, basking in empty reputation. Even great sects of the past had vanished when they failed to innovate. To restore Manhwa, its disciples needed to witness a true display of the plum blossom sword at its peak. This had been Harold's lifelong wish. At the time, I thought it was just his humility, but now I could sense Manhwa's decline. In the last 100 years, aside from Harold, no other true talents had arisen. Yet perhaps Manhwa's foundation was so strong that later disciples found it nearly impossible to break through. Still, since I had once been the most feared sword of the demonic sect and the real William had died in the attack, I would take his place and create a sword style unique to Manhwa. It must not only take form but also embody the spirit of the mountain itself. That meant starting from the most basic techniques and, once I mastered all of Manhwa's arts, opening Harold's secret manual. With this resolve, I sat cross-legged, placing my hands over my dantian. First, I had to erase William's original martial training. Even relearning the same techniques would grant me new insights. Manhwa's foundational, chasing blossoms method, was no weaker than the demonic ghost blade arts I once used. In my past life, I valued practicality, but Manhwa's philosophy was the opposite, offering me fresh perspectives. 2.5 days passed swiftly. Then my junior brother Walter burst into my room, worried. He told me I had not shown up for morning training in nearly 3 days since leaving Elder White's hall. His words startled me. I hadn't realized how much time had passed. When I followed Walter to the training grounds, I saw the disciples practicing. Their forms were the same as years ago, only worse. Many had unstable stances, unable to focus on posture. Clearly, many of them hadn't even mastered the basics. Still, the disciple leading the demonstration wasn't bad. If I remember correctly, his name was Marcus, right? This also made me feel confused. Being able to stand at the front and correct his junior stances during training, how should I put it, Marcus looked more like the senior brother among the second-generation disciples. In contrast, the original host's body not only looked frail and weak but also had an overly cautious personality. Still, there was nothing strange about it. Marcus had a calm nature and, even at a young age, carried the air of a true hero. So it was only natural that the second-generation juniors wanted to follow him. After the training ended, a few juniors saw me and hurried over to ask about my injuries. I waved my hand and firmly told them there was no problem anymore. This surprised them. What was going on? Why did it feel like I had become a completely different person? Just then, Marcus also walked over to greet me. What annoyed me was that this guy actually stood on the steps to speak. At this moment, his attitude was extremely friendly, very grateful for the elders and my trust in handing over the important task of guiding martial training to him. I replied flatly that from now on, I would be the one to take on this duty. The pupils of Andrew and Marcus widened in shock. Several disciples who heard this were also surprised. Marcus quickly put his friendly expression back on, saying we had already agreed before. I refused outright. I was only doing what the senior brother should do. Was there a problem with that? Marcus still insisted, saying that before, I had handed the matter to him because I lacked confidence to fulfill the senior brother's role. As senior brother, shouldn't I avoid going back on my word? In that instant, I saw through his true intent. It seemed Marcus was aiming to become the sect leader's successor disciple. The so-called successor disciple would be granted the right to inherit the position of sect leader. But after the bloody history of Shangxi, there were very few first-generation disciples left in Manhwa. Even the remaining first-generation disciples and elders were overwhelmed with the task of rebuilding the sect. As for me now, if I wanted to fulfill Harold's last wish of changing Manhwa, then instead of persuading elders or the few first-generation disciples, the best path was to influence the second-generation disciples, who were in their prime. Moreover, it was said that only the sect leader of Manhwa and the successor disciple could train in the peerless technique, the violet mist star art. Even in the entire martial world, it was one of the rarest and most extraordinary star arts. If I wanted to use William's body to surpass my former self, I had to obtain this art. At this moment, Marcus no longer spoke kindly. Did I even deserve it? During the Night Palace's attack on the sect, what was I doing secretly? All the elders had repeatedly warned us not to engage the Night Palace disciples no matter what, yet I couldn't hold back in the end. As a result, not only did I fail to kill even a single Night Palace disciple, I also forced the elders to waste their strength protecting me. Worse still, because I couldn't restrain myself, many juniors who had been enduring finally drew their swords as well. If it weren't for the elders' desperate protection, many of us wouldn't even be alive to stand here. At this, I nodded slowly. You made a good point. So to make up for my mistake, I would once again shoulder the duty of senior brother. Saying that, I slowly stepped up onto the stairs before me. When I reached Marcus's side, my eyes suddenly grew sharp. Since when did I need to look up to you to speak? And all this time I've been talking with you, I wasn't trying to persuade you, but to let the second-generation disciples once again follow me, and by the way, to inform you. Marcus immediately broke into a cold sweat. Was the man before him really the William he once knew? I stepped onto a stair higher than Marcus and declared, starting tomorrow morning, I will be the one to lead training. If you still have any dissatisfaction, you may come find me after practice. Just as I was leaving, Marcus couldn't help but ask, Senior brother, why does it feel like you've become a completely different person? My voice sounded calm. Isn't that natural? Once a man experiences life and death, he matures quickly. At that moment, the juniors below were all speculating about what we had said. At first, Brother Marcus was very angry, but he quickly calmed down. And afterward, his expression didn't turn ugly either. So many thought Brother Marcus was only yielding to spare me embarrassment. Among them, a few juniors loyal to Marcus resolved to be extra considerate toward me as well. Soon, night arrived. I heard faint breathing sounds outside my door. My cold voice rang out slowly, so, coming here this late, what do you want from me? As I spoke, I gripped my wooden sword tightly. Since you came sneaking about, I couldn't help but feel a bit curious. Seeing me walk out with my sword in hand, the juniors no longer hid their intent. They had come here to make me retract my words earlier today. Because Brother Marcus had only yielded to avoid making me lose face. Cracking my stiff neck, I asked, so Marcus sent you here? They immediately denied it, saying they had come on their own. Besides, they wanted me to consider things from another angle. They weren't here because they disliked me. They simply wanted a capable senior brother to guide their training so they could progress faster in martial arts. But as for me, my past performance could only be described as poor. My expression darkened instantly. Even if you have your own concerns, has Manhwa truly abandoned the respect between senior and junior? But since you've shifted the topic to strength, then draw your wooden swords. Hearing this, they no longer hesitated and rushed forward with blades in hand. But with just a slight sidestep, the surrounding airflow alone shattered the wooden sword before me. Then, with a casual wave of my hand, another junior who hadn't even steadied his stance was thrown to the ground. I walked over and grabbed them by their collars. Losing to your senior brother isn't shameful. But I must still help you get rid of these bad habits. After a round of harsh lessons, the two of them were completely subdued. If other juniors dare to disrespect me, what will you do? Naturally, they'll get beaten up along with us, they replied. I pressed further, do you truly think my strength is inferior to Marcus? The two answered in unison, absolutely not. Seeing this, I no longer made things difficult. After a few reminders, I let them go. But even after their figures vanished from sight, I didn't withdraw my gaze. How long do you plan to keep hiding? At that, Edward was startled and hurried out from the shadows. He explained that he had happened to see Mason and the others heading toward my room, and since he was worried, he followed to check. He hadn't expected me to actually defeat Mason. So, had I been hiding my strength all along? Looking at Edward, countless thoughts filled my mind. The second-generation disciples I saw now could be divided into two groups, those who were courteous to the senior brother yet always kept their distance, and those who, while not openly showing it. From the shadows came disciples who mocked the senior brother without mercy, but only Ethan stood apart. Before my rebirth, he should have been by Victor's side, quietly solving many troubles. After observing him for so many days, I realized Ethan's nature was somewhat indifferent, yet why did he repeatedly help Victor? When Victor questioned me, I told him I wasn't hiding my strength, only that I had recently gained new insight into martial arts. As for the details, I would explain during tomorrow's morning training. My words didn't raise Ethan's suspicion, since what I displayed was indeed the Huashan Sec's entry-level sword technique, but performed more perfectly than anyone had ever seen. Still, this troubled me, although my explanation passed for now, my strength was already great, and how could that be explained away? Meanwhile, when William returned to his quarters, he was noticed by Mason, who asked Leonard if something had happened. After learning the full story, Mason felt helpless and decided he must properly discipline William and Victor in the future. Even if I regained power, my nature would never allow me to rely on petty tricks. Soon came the next morning's training. Standing on the platform, I told them bluntly, though discouraging, their skills were weak. The true reason for a warrior's strength lies in solid fundamentals, not illusions. The river sword technique was Huashan's foundation, so from today, mornings would be devoted solely to practicing it. Before I finished, Leonard interrupted, questioning if it wouldn't be better to pursue advanced techniques. I gave him no courtesy. If he had objections, he could step forward. With a sneer, Leonard mocked me, suggesting my poor skills made me unfit to teach such an important technique. I turned to the others. If anyone doubted my strength, I would face Leonard using only the river sword. If his wooden blade touched me or broke my stance, he would win, and I'd step down. Leonard laughed, confident, and attacked with fierce speed, but I blocked every strike effortlessly. His techniques grew more frantic, sharp thrusts and sweeping cuts, yet none touched me. The disciples were stunned, for Leonard had unleashed his best moves. Smiling, I told him he was stronger than most, but still far beneath me. Unless he had greater skill, the fight was over. Leonard froze, unable to continue. I explained his flaw, relying only on his arms, neglecting the true power of the legs. To wield a sword is to command the whole body. With that, I demonstrated, ending the duel swiftly. 2 minutes later, I ordered William and another to carry Leonard away. The others, unless they wished to challenge me, must resume training. Watching them sweat reminded me of a past talk with Charles, Huashan's greatest swordsman. I once asked why, among many disciples, he accepted only Victor. Charles explained Victor's talent was ordinary, but he had never seen him give up. Others with genius found shortcuts easily, but Victor persevered. To raise an average man into a master was not just a teacher's duty, but the true essence of martial arts. Now, though I wished to handpick talented disciples, I was also the senior guiding Huashan's second generation. That path, teaching all to rise, was the true way. Even if I had failed my own disciple before, now I would teach every brother, move by move, until Huashan flourished again. From that day, all disciples entered grueling training, while I stole time to sharpen my own senses. The sharper the perception, the quicker one could detect subtle changes in life around them, an invaluable asset for martial cultivation. At first, however, even with focus, I could feel nothing. But now it's different. For example, right now I can feel someone following behind me. Only that person has no intention of harming me. It looks more like simple curiosity toward me. It's just that my level is still very low. Against a presence far stronger than myself, I can't accurately judge their exact location. Right after that, I arrived at the Huashan sect scripture pavilion. I clasped my hands and respectfully bowed to Elder Henry. I wanted to come and take a look at the manuals. Elder Henry told me I could browse freely. But since I was still injured, I shouldn't push myself too hard. However, what he said next left me a little confused. Something about his disciple troubling me. Until now, the ones I had personally disciplined were only 3. Could it be that Elder Henry wanted to find fault with me? Yet instead, I heard Elder Henry apologizing to me. It was indeed Mason who did something that deserved punishment. As his master, he admitted fault for failing to teach properly. I didn't take these things to heart. Elder Henry, you don't need to worry. I only did what a senior brother should do. But as soon as my words fell, Elder Henry immediately turned his head toward me. He must have thought he misheard. Did I just say something? That I only did what a senior brother should do. Then his gaze froze. Since when had William's eyes become so sharp? But he didn't voice his doubts. There's nothing else, go ahead and study the manuals. As I turned to leave, he gradually understood. It must be that losing my master, though a heavy blow, also steadied my heart. It gave me much more confidence than before. There I searched for a long time before finally finding the manual I needed. Although improving my level was important, the concept of level was actually vague. Some people stubbornly believe that level equals martial skill. But I completely disagreed with that view. Because in the martial world, life and death are not simply determined by one's martial strength. Let alone in a life-or-death fight, no one ever thinks of clashing head-on. So in my opinion, at the critical moment of life and death, the most important thing is to flexibly use the martial arts one has learned, along with excellent judgment and sharp thinking. So the true meaning of level should be mastering martial arts completely, engraving them into the body, and also including the experience and insights gained through repeated practice. This was also the truth I realized after becoming the #1 sword of the demonic sect. Therefore, the first step to improve my level was to begin by understanding what martial arts truly are. But starting only from entry-level manuals, it was hard to grasp the Huashan sect swordsmanship, because some manuals were still forbidden for me to read. This rule existed to prevent disciples from blindly reading advanced manuals, seeking shortcuts, and eventually losing themselves. After the river sword technique came 3 more sword arts: the gale sword, the falling plum sword, and the fragrant sword. Only by fully comprehending the essence of these 3 could one attempt to begin the plum blossom sword. After that came Huashan's famed ultimate techniques: the 7-fold plum blossom sword, the tri-spirit plum blossom sword, and the exquisite plum blossom sword. These final 3 ultimate arts were the true foundation that allowed the Huashan sect to stand among the top 3 sword schools of the martial world. It was said that the sword saint, who led Huashan to its peak of glory, could wield all forms of the plum blossom sword with ease. Summarizing it now, if Huashan martial arts were likened to a plum blossom tree, then the river sword technique would be the root buried in the earth. Growing above were the gale, falling plum, and fragrant sword arts as the sturdy trunk. The plum blossom sword itself formed the branches. And those 3 ultimate plum blossom sword techniques were the most dazzling blossoms. Up to this point, my understanding of Huashan martial arts only reached the trunk. Even though my current strength was enough to qualify to study the higher plum blossom sword techniques, the condition for starting was to hold Huashan's unique plum blossom sword, granted only to disciples recognized for their strength. So for now, my priority was to find a way to quickly obtain the plum blossom sword. Just then, a somewhat unfamiliar voice sounded in my ear. "Do you wish to learn the ultimate plum blossom sword?" I looked up and quickly bowed respectfully. Disciple William greets the sect leader. The sect leader slowly explained that it had been a long time since he came to the scripture pavilion. Out of curiosity, he had stepped inside, but hadn't expected to find me here. Just as well, he had some questions to ask me. Why had I changed the morning training of the second-generation disciples to the river sword technique? I could roughly see the sect leader's intent. By asking such trivial questions, he likely wanted to confirm that I was truly fine, and that Charles's death had not shaken me. After a moment of thought, I replied slowly. It was precisely because the foundation of Huashan lay in the river sword technique, and the foundation of the second-generation disciples was utterly poor. To put it bluntly, almost none of them had truly mastered it. My answer was almost flawless. Since he was the sect leader, he too must have realized the poor level of the second generation. Yet the moment my words fell, his expression froze. He hadn't expected my attitude to be even harsher than he imagined. One could say my temperament had completely changed. The old William would never have spoken a single unpleasant word to others. But now I could utter such harsh criticism without hesitation. Could it be that the Black Knight Palace's attack had struck me too hard, making me punish myself and force myself to do things I once disliked? At this time, I continued slowly. In fact, all second-generation disciples were familiar with the river sword technique. But they first practiced it when they just joined Huashan, so by now it had been a long time. Without regular practice, it's easy to forget the most fundamental things. The sect leader seemed puzzled. In truth, many disciples still secretly practiced the river sword. But the longer they trained, the worse they became compared to before. I spoke directly. Everyone knows that every sect in the martial world has its own philosophy of martial arts. These philosophies naturally blend into each sect's martial techniques. Thus, a sect's martial arts embody its ideals of how martial power should be wielded. For example, Wudong's Taiji Fist and Taiji Sword. Or Tiansong sect's Sun-Piercing Sword and Moon-Chasing Sword. Or Qinsheng sect's Azure Cloud Sword, Scarlet Mist Sword, and Sichuan's Radiant Sword. So learning martial arts should never be just about physical practice. More importantly, one must also focus on spiritual cultivation. Even long after I finished speaking, the sect leader still hadn't fully recovered from his thoughts. When I expressed my views, I appeared completely calm, as if I had understood these principles for a long time. And what I said carried undeniable truth. At this moment, the feeling he had of me. It felt more like facing withered grass. The sect leader steered the topic back again. Then how do you think second-generation disciples should act in my eyes? They should understand that mastering famous techniques is not the essence of martial arts. Instead, they should truly comprehend Huashan martial arts from the heart. Only then, to adapt to life, should they constantly refine themselves. This gradual process, in my view, is the true essence of martial arts. As I spoke these words, the sect leader suddenly thought of Xian Chao. Because he had once heard the same reasoning from Xian Chao. So could it be that it was because I possessed such extraordinary talent that Xian Chao chose me? But regaining his composure, the sect leader asked me how I planned to walk my own path. My path is simple, to become a master and then surpass my master. Because I must carry on his unfulfilled wish. After I said this, the sect leader suddenly burst out laughing. He was relieved that I had truly walked out from the shadow of my master's death. He also believed that the only plum blossom blooming on Huashan, leaving behind its sole bud, would one day bloom again in the mortal world. Before leaving, the sect leader thought for a moment and gave me some advice. Actually, on Huashan, there are not only plum blossoms, but also many other flowers. Why then was Huashan's final choice the plum blossom, which neither looked outstanding nor had vivid colors? If I could grasp the meaning behind it, it would be an excellent cultivation. Time passed just like that for 2.5 months. At this moment, on Huashan, the elders were discussing the matter of recruiting third-generation disciples. One elder proposed that this time, recruitment could include lay disciples. This would show the unshakable strength of Huashan. Sect leader Wensi nodded. Disciples from other regions could be excluded, but here in Shaanxi, second-generation disciples could be sent personally to select them. This would also be a challenging trial outside the sect. The scene shifted to Pucheng in Shaanxi province. Behind me followed several of the most outstanding among the second-generation disciples. Our group quietly appeared in this place. But as we passed through, we brushed shoulders with another group. Though it was just a minor collision, upon seeing our Taoist robes, they refused to let go. They insisted that Wu Hua kneel and apologize on the spot. I recognized their attire, it should be from the underworld. Although the Shaanxi blood tragedy had caused Huashan great harm, it should not be to the point where such a small sect dared to provoke Huashan openly. So there must be another force behind them. But just a few street thugs could never destroy Huashan's name. So I drew my sword and pointed it at one of them. I had already seen that you deliberately bumped into us first. And you seem to look down on us, newcomers to the martial world. Could it be that the underworld sect wishes to openly challenge Huashan? My words startled their leader. He quickly waved his hand, admitting it was their own fault. Then, without looking back, he fled with his men. My action made Wu Zhen beside me feel ashamed. When the other side had provoked us earlier, he had wanted Wu Hua to apologize and end the matter peacefully. He only thought that since we were wearing Huashan robes, our behavior outside must not disgrace the sect. Yet he ignored the fact that their actions were actually challenging Huashan's reputation. At that time, I had only been watching their movements, then resolved the conflict with boldness and calm. So was he still far from being worthy of the senior brother's position? After a full meal, Wu Hua was still puzzled about what the trial really was. The sect leader had only sent us out to recruit third-generation disciples, without saying anything more, simply handing us the responsibility. I believed otherwise. This way, we could better train our judgment. And today, had not something unusual already happened? Before we set out, the sect leader had said that we could decide for ourselves. And now I had an idea, to teach those underworld thugs a lesson. First, let us each use our skills to gather intelligence about them. Then tomorrow at dawn we will regroup. The so-called underworld refers to people who often commit acts against morality. But they are not the same as evil forces like the Palace of Night. Their purpose is simple, to ignore the law and find ways to satisfy their own desires. So the concept of the underworld is vague, it can mean killers, or bandits. At that moment, I silently appeared behind one of their groups. In broad daylight, you dare to seize a woman in the street? Seems the force behind your underworld isn't small. My sudden words left them confused. Was I here deliberately looking for trouble? With a loud bang, my knee shot forward, slamming into his forehead. Almost effortlessly, I ended the fight. Afterwards, I used the underworld's money pouch to buy a large bag of food. Walking to a house, I saw beggars rushing toward it. Gripping my sword, I swung it behind me. I did not bring this bounty here out of charity. Whoever dares to touch this food without permission must first answer to my sword. At that moment, an older beggar quickly clasped his fists to me. He was Xiao Zhongai of the beggar gang. Here, he apologized to me on behalf of his people. I returned the gesture. I am Wu Hui, second-generation disciple of Huashan. I came to ask you for information about the underworld forces entrenched in Pucheng. As for this food, I leave it to you to share among your brothers. It turned out that there had once been a lay sect under Huashan here called the Slippery Willow Sect. But during the Shangxi blood tragedy, it had been annihilated by the Blood Scar Gang. The Blood Scar Gang was no ordinary underworld force. Even their lowest members had once practiced martial arts. But as for the true power behind the gang, Xiao Zhongai did not dare to confirm. He had only heard that 5 people often contacted them. And those 5 came from the Nine Nether Sword sect, one of the 3 great sects of Shangxi. Though among the 3, the Nine Nether Sword sect was somewhat weaker, they had never shown the slightest respect to Huashan, one of the 9 great sects and one gang, or to the Zhongnan sect. They acted arrogantly and domineeringly, and their sect was far larger than Huashan. Yet by logic, why would the 9 Nether sect set their sights on a small lay sect here? And given their usual style, they should have openly established their dominance quickly. In comparison, I was more curious about the identity of those 5 people. The next day, I recalled the intelligence I had gathered the night before. The identity of one of those 5 was the Red Wolf sword. Yet in my memory, there was no such figure. And Xiao Zhongai also said he only knew the name. Soon, the time came for the appointed meeting, where my junior brothers would share what they had learned. They each shared the intel they gathered. Victor was the first to speak. Based on his investigation, he discovered that the gang was called the Blood Scars, and they had risen to power by swallowing up the local Huashan clans. William learned that these thugs were extremely ruthless, often using their dominance in Pucheng to oppress the people. More importantly, even the lowest members of their gang had martial training, so even the authorities feared them. Hearing this, I nodded. Everything you've gathered is true, but we must understand one thing: how did they learn martial arts? Though low-level techniques are easy to acquire, these men are too used to bullying here to bother learning them on their own. So someone must be secretly helping them train. I already know that person comes from the Nether Sword sect, but I still don't know why he aids these criminals. I shared my thoughts. I believe we shouldn't delay and should eliminate this gang immediately. A few junior brothers hesitated, since their backer was from the Nether Sword sect. Charles thought we should consider carefully, as this isn't a decision second-generation disciples can make on their own. William, however, argued that since these criminals harm the people, we as Huashan disciples should act for justice. Samuel's eyes widened. He agreed with Charles, pointing out that Huashan was already struggling to recover from the bloody history of Shangxi. If we clashed with the Nether Sword sect now, Huashan would fall into crisis. Hearing their arguments, I felt comforted. You all make sense, I said. But the Nether Sword sect is domineering. If they wanted something, they wouldn't hide their intentions. If they truly cared, we'd be facing their branch here, not just the blood scars. That means their attention isn't on Huashan. This gang may only be tied to Scarlet Wolf personally. Still, George had doubts. Can we really trust this intel? Of course, what source is more reliable than the beggar sect? Formed of beggars, they gather intel through their vast network and trade it for food, all while upholding martial honor. Once decided, we soon reached the blood scars territory. I declared bluntly, if you don't want a beating, have your gang members and Scarlet Wolf come out now. The gang leader emerged, noticed our Huashan robes, and sneered. Just second-generation disciples, leave now, and I won't pursue today's offense. I didn't move. Shouldn't it be you who leaves? And your tone irritates me, so you'd best not anger me further. He laughed at us, mocking that we didn't know who backed them. With a wave, he ordered his men to attack. At that moment, William saw a poor couple, bloodied and barely breathing, lying on the ground. He rushed to help, insisting they be sent for treatment, but two thugs charged him with blades. William used bamboo leaf palm to push them back, but I scolded him, your sword isn't for show, they mean to kill you. Why hesitate? Looking around, I realized this was the juniors' first real battle since joining Huashan. They had no idea of the dangers or the cruelty of the world. Facing spitting and sand throwing, they grew uneasy. Yet such trials would harden their resolve. Without elders to protect them, they had only their own strength. Still, one surprised me, Charles wasn't soft like the others, he struck without holding back. Just then, the blood scars leader charged me with his blade. Thinking I was the weakest, he rushed in, but within moments, his body lay severed on the ground, stunning his men. If even their leader was defeated, what chance did they have? From above, a cold voice drifted down, with the leader gone, whoever kills these brats becomes the new boss. I chuckled. So, Scarlet Wolf finally dares to speak. He was surprised that I seemed to know him. For Huashan disciples to know his name, he must be famous. I cut him off, I only heard of you yesterday, and I don't bother remembering weaklings. His teacup cracked in his hand. Few Huashan disciples spoke so bluntly, my words as sharp as the dark sections. He floated down, deciding to fight me himself. If he did, I'd need all my strength. But my voice whispered in his ear, will you really make me use my full power? Do you even have the skill to force me? Scarlet Wolf clutched his ears in shock, I was suddenly behind him. A few swift strikes left him drenched in cold sweat. He couldn't even follow my steps, let alone my movements. Meanwhile, my sword remained calmly sheathed. I stayed composed, this was a chance I couldn't waste. Ever since being reborn in William's body. It has already been some time. During this period, I have been studying how to coordinate Huashan martial arts with the techniques I possessed in my past life. All along, I never had the chance to prove the results of my research. Since the level of second-generation disciples is not equal to mine, it has been hard to make a judgment. And the elders, busy repairing Huashan, have had no time to spar with me. So crossing swords now with Scarlet Wolf is a rare opportunity for me. At this moment Scarlet Wolf's figure moved, charging at me once again. I first sidestepped to avoid his thrust, then slightly lowered myself to dodge his sweeping slash. After that, I struck out with my left palm, unleashing Huashan's bamboo leaf palm. This left Scarlet Wolf utterly shaken. Could it be that his techniques had already been seen through by me? But he had only made 2 moves in total. If I could discern the pattern of his martial arts in just 1 or 2 moves, then my realm must be far above his. Thinking this, Scarlet Wolf decided to hold nothing back and immediately unleashed his strongest technique, the Scarlet Wolf sword style. In response, I lightly stepped forward with Huashan's 5-point falling plum sword. Although your sword style looks fierce, in reality it holds even more flaws. And if I am not mistaken, your so-called Scarlet Wolf sword style is actually the Thief Fong sword style created by a predecessor, though you have only learned the incomplete first half. Scarlet Wolf grew increasingly panicked. How could I know such a thing? And now he was gradually unable to handle the sword strokes before him. With a single swish, half of Scarlet Wolf's hair was cut off by me. From the start, I had not used my sword, instead moving behind him, and even now I had not struck to take his life. To him, it felt as though I was not treating this as a proper duel at all, but rather using him as a test subject for my martial research. This was an unbearable humiliation for Scarlet Wolf. In fury, he drew upon his full inner energy, unleashing a 3-strike Scarlet Wolf combo in succession. My eyes sharpened, my wrist turned, and with seamless technique I dissolved his attacks. 3 crisp clashing sounds rang out as his combo was easily neutralized by me. Then my sword point shifted, thrusting cleanly forward without hesitation. With a muffled thud, the blade pierced into Scarlet Wolf's chest. The ferocity in his eyes instantly faded, and his body fell heavily to the ground, no longer drawing breath.